Welcome, everyone, to the Information's TITV. My name is Akash Pasricha. It is Tuesday, September 16th. We have got a busy show for you today, packed with a lot of things enterprise software focused today. We are talking about Satya Nadella's new playbook for Microsoft's 365 Copilot and how that's going. We're also going to bring on Index Ventures' newest partner, the former chief product officer of MongoDB, who has just joined the firm. We're then going to be talking to the CEO of Clay, the company that sees itself as a go-to-market engineer. We're going to get into what that term actually means. But I want to start with a big story that we published this week about Salesforce. Salesforce has gone all in on AI with AgentForce and its tools, but this week, my colleague Kevin McLaughlin published an in-depth piece about some of the challenges the company has had selling AI to its customers. There are a ton of different angles to this story, from pricing to talent to competition to Mark Benioff's management style. I want to bring on Kevin to talk about a story, and I also want to bring on Adam Mansfield, who leads software negotiations at UpperEdge, to give us a bit of his perspective. Gentlemen, welcome to you both. It's great to have you.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, appreciate the opportunity. I will say I love the intro music. It's one of my favorite things here. It reminds me of getting ready for college football season. So,
you know, as a drummer and someone who wished that they could have played in a drum line growing up, I mean, we had to get the drums in there. So I'm happy it resonated with at least one person.
I love it.
All right. Well, Kevin, let's go to you. So, big picture, I think it's well understood that selling AI is really hard for enterprise software giants. But you wrote about Salesforce. And so the first question I have for you is, tell us about why Salesforce's challenges stood out to you.
Well, I think Salesforce, perhaps more than any other company, has gone so hard into AI that they've become this sort of bellwether. And what I mean by that is other CEOs, in some ways, they've sort of couched their predictions about AI and what AI would mean for the company. Mark Benioff, CEO and co-founder of Salesforce, at one point last year suggested jokingly, I think, that he might rename the company to AgentForce, which is also the name of the product. So I think that watching how their customers adopt AgentForce, which is their main AI product, is very interesting because Salesforce has a unique ability over the years to get customers on board with new products. And so for those reasons, they are a very interesting case study.
Okay. And so are customers adopting AgentForce? How's that going?
They are, but perhaps not to the level that Salesforce wanted at this point. 9 months in, less than 5% of the 150,000 plus global Salesforce customer base is paying for AgentForce. There are a number of reasons for that. And it's not to say that AgentForce is not going to see adoption someday. But at this stage of the game, myself and my colleagues have written about this quite often in recent months. The ROI is a little bit murky for a lot of companies. In some cases, they don't have their data in order. There's a myriad of reasons why they're not adopting quickly.
Give us some of the reasons that you've been hearing about.
Well, cost can be an issue. Also, like the first wave of AI was about assistance and sort of features and applications, and the ROI just hasn't been there for that, which is why, sort of as a separate topic, we're starting to see CEOs talking more frankly about AI as labor replacement. That wasn't really the focus of this story. But yeah, those are just a couple of the things that we reported.
So, Adam, your firm helps some of these companies buy software, essentially. My understanding is you basically help them negotiate better rates on these giant software packages for companies like Salesforce and a host of these big public software companies. What are they telling you about AgentForce and how they're finding the product and whether they want it at all?
Yeah, no, listen, there's a couple things here, right? So when we work with our organizations, absolutely at the end of the deal, you want to make sure you have the right pricing, right? The right protections, the right flexibility. But before you even get down that path, you have to start thinking about, well, why are you even considering it, right? And that's where there's a lot of like blank faces, right? There's this idea of like, well, it's AI. So from the top down, we want to start thinking about Salesforce and their part in this. What ends up happening is when they bring Salesforce in, the next conversation is also, but I'm spending a lot of money with other Salesforce products that I'm not getting the full value on. So I need to really rationalize this. So before I start jumping into AI, is Salesforce going to help me on everything else that I'm spending millions of dollars with on? Like where's that happening? So I think
Right.
that's slowing things down a little.
Okay.
I would also tell you that the business case component to it. I mean, Kevin mentioned this and it was well said in his article, right? Like these customers, a lot of them you have to think about as individuals. These C-suite individuals are going to put their neck on the line,
Hmm.
right? And this is not something that you just taste it and then maybe you can correct it later.
These are
Because
people
the
that have to they have to say, I'm putting my name to this product.
100%. And on top of that, there's the licensing component to it, right? This is not by the head count anymore, right? This ties actually really nicely into the labor piece, which I won't go too deep into. But when Benioff gets up there with a smile on his face and he talks about 9,000 people going to 4,000 people, that's a head count thing. The industry, the financial community talks a lot about this with Salesforce and others and says, well, if companies are going to be reducing their staff and you sell products based on a per head count basis, help me understand how I'm going to make money.
Hmm.
So the way they overcome that is AI, consumption-based pricing.
Right.
But when I talk about putting your neck on the line, it's not just the dollars up front. It's also this flywheel effect, which, by the way, everyone within Salesforce who gets up on the earnings call, they talk about the flywheel effect as well.
Right.
This thing starts spinning.
Right.
No customer wants to then have this thing spinning and not really be able to KPI or metricize the value proposition that they're obtaining back. It's a very difficult thing.
Right. And tell me a little bit about, one thing that Kevin sort of hinted at in his story, and I wanted to ask you about, Adam, is sort of the convergence of these enterprise software companies with respect to everyone is doing agents. And I don't know, it kind of feels like they all sort of do something around the same thing. Is there kind of a convergence of these companies in terms of the products that they sell? And then, the secondary question there is, does that cause decision paralysis for customers saying, hey, there's so many options now, we don't know which one to pick?
So it's a great question. So I definitely think that's creating paralysis for sure, right? It's like anything else in life. When you give someone a lot of options and they seem like they're good options on the surface, you got to take time to evaluate them, right? Number one. When you talk about millions and millions of dollars associated with these options, you're going to take even more time to evaluate them. When you're talking about all of these vendors likely already being customer or vendors for you where you're selling other things with big cost profiles, you're going to take even more time before you give them dollars. So all that adds time. What I will tell you, though, going back to what I said before, when it comes to Salesforce, the real friction, at least the deals that we work on, the customers we interact with, large enterprises, it really stems from I'm looking at a base of products that I am spending millions of dollars on, and I don't really understand the value I'm getting out of the things I'm already paying you for. I also don't understand where my dollars are going to enhance the thing I already have.
Right.
And don't tell me the enhancement is I got to give you AI.
Right.
That creates friction. That creates delay, which is why, in my opinion, and the 5% number is a great one, Kevin. But when you talk about numbers and you dive in a little bit more, what is it? 12,000 customers are currently AgentForce customers. And then to their credit, they said only 6,000 are actually paying. So there's some murkiness in there too. Like, what does that actually mean?
So, Kevin, I wanted to ask you about some of these startups that are starting to encroach or trying to encroach on Salesforce's space. And we had Brett Taylor on, the CEO or former CEO, former co-CEO of Salesforce, who's now heading up Sierra. And, you talked a little bit about some of the, I guess, the annual contract value that Salesforce is expecting from AgentForce. Company kind of says that's sort of a measure of annual recurring revenue. And it felt like that was kind of in the same ballpark as what Sierra is sort of approaching with its own revenue, right? So the question I have is, I mean, you've got a startup whose whole business is AI, and it's already approaching the scale of AgentForce's business. Am I thinking about that wrong, or walk me through that?
Well, when Salesforce first introduced AgentForce last year at the Dreamforce conference in September, Benioff's pitch was, this product is part of our platform, and as a result, it will be easy for customers to implement. It's not like you're out buying some bespoke product that is separated from everything else. It's part of the platform. What's happening, at least with Sierra and another startup called Decagon, is that they're coming in and they're focusing just on customer service right now. And I think
Mhm.
Sierra is also focusing on sales enablement, which is a separate topic. But basically, yeah, the startups are getting buzz, they're getting investment, they're getting attention, and they're getting revenue. Sierra is on track for 100 million in annual recurring revenue. It's been reported.
Yeah.
Decagon, we don't know a little too much about what's going on with them, but the point is that they are not beholden to the same base of customers that Salesforce is. The pressure is far less on them.
Right.
Of course, they're going to have an advantage. I mean, the question is, what's the long-term play for Sierra? And Brett Taylor on TITV a few weeks ago said that best of breed, which is basically the best technology, companies are not as focused on the cost as they are on the quality of the experience right now. So, yeah, the startups are having their moment, but
Right.
I wouldn't say that that gives them the inside track to win this race.
Right. Right. Adam, last question for you. And then, by the way, we're going to keep you on because we're going to talk about another software company in Microsoft in just a minute. But very quickly, as it relates to CRM and competition with Salesforce, I mean, you deal with really, really large software contracts with your
Mhm.
clients. How much are they paying attention to these smaller startups, or is it something that, again, they get a lot of news, they get a lot of buzz, but
Yep.
the large companies, are they really paying attention to them?
Yeah, it's a really good question. So two things. First, like Sierra as the example. You know, Taylor has a pretty, if there is even such thing as a Rolodex anymore, he has a pretty big Rolodex, right? So that's part of it. The other thing is, so he's getting access and they're getting conversations. And on that value, they're focusing on value, not, and it doesn't feel like they're forcing it down the customer's throat. They're trying to earn the business.
Right.
There's a difference there. In terms of competition, in full transparency, for the deals, the customers we work with, when you think about a replacement for Salesforce, generally speaking, there's Microsoft is coming in, right? So
Yep.
they're D365. We all know that they have their Death Star of cash that they can point at a customer and say, hey, well, what if we were able to do this? Maybe we could get you to take some more market share in the D365 space or the CRM space. But there's other players, right? There's some of them, we don't spend a lot of time in full transparency on kind of that smaller market. It's
Right.
mostly
Got it.
just Microsoft. Um, but again, they're massive too, and how you approach them is critically important too.
Right. Great. Well, Kevin, thank you so much for coming on. We really appreciate it. It was a fascinating story, and you write a ton about Salesforce. So I think we're going to have you on more and more as the story evolves. And Adam, don't go anywhere because we're going to bring you back on in just a second to talk about Microsoft. That is Kevin and Adam. Okay. Well, Salesforce is not the only company paying close attention to its AI rollout. Microsoft is also doing the same thing, and it is keeping a close watch on the uptake of Microsoft Office 365 Copilot, which is the AI-infused version of Microsoft Office. My colleague Aaron Holmes published a story this week about some of the ways in which Satya Nadella has reorganized the company to keep that product competitive. I want to bring on Aaron, and I want to bring back Adam, who also has experience talking about Microsoft's products. Welcome to the both of you. Aaron, great to see you.
Thanks for having me.
Okay, so let's talk 365 Copilot. How exactly is that product going for Microsoft right now?
So, I mean, there are ups and downs so far. I think that, Microsoft has made some progress convincing businesses that it can be worth the $30 per user per month upcharge for Office Copilot, which basically more than doubles the baseline price of the product. And, I've heard from some customers who say it's great for things like taking notes in meetings and, organizing their email inbox. But at the same time, I think Microsoft has struggled with some of the more advanced features that it promised when the product debuted 2 years ago. Things like, creating PowerPoint presentations or carrying out tasks within Excel. And I think what I'm hearing from customers is that it's sometimes hard for them to explain what value they're getting for that $30 price point.
Hmm.
And as a result, it's not really clear that the AI features are helping move the needle or accelerate the growth of Office more broadly. So I think now what we're seeing is Microsoft is taking some big steps to try to get the products to a better place. We, broke the news last week that they're about to announce a new deal with Anthropic to power some of those Excel features. And we're also hearing about, a little bit more leniency on discounting the product, which I think points to the urgency to get this into more customers' contracts.
Adam, what are your customers telling you about Microsoft?
Yeah, a lot of the things that Aaron just covered. Just to go a little bit deeper on that, I think number one, I think Microsoft is approaching customers originally from a hardline stance, right? Like, hey, we're Microsoft. If you're going to do AI, why wouldn't you just add Copilot, right? They led with that. They led with, if you want to do Copilot, well, you got to start with 300 as a minimum. So how wouldn't you want to start with 300? So they started to kind of ease up on some of these things. But I will still tell you that the ease up still isn't driving at least the customers we work with to a place of saying, all right, great. We're ready to go from 300 to 5,000 or 300 to 10,000. We're not ready, right? We're seeing some incremental.
We're not ready. Why?
Well, part of it, there's two real main reasons. The number one is they're still struggling with the what am I actually paying for conversation, right? So what happens is there's a big sticker tied to this, right? And this is important, and I'll spend a second on this if I can. The Copilot price is $30 per user per month unless you negotiate it down, right? Which there is abilities to do that. But the real way customers look at this, which is creating friction, is it's not $30 per user per month because you have to have the underlying Microsoft 365 subscription. So the real math is I'm giving this product, Copilot now added, to Sally in accounting, and I'm paying whatever it is per user per month, which is very expensive. And what I'm hearing is that she's not using it or she's using it for note-taking. That is ridiculous. I am not going to invest more into this so that more of my employees, Steve, Bob, et al., have this very expensive headcount cost for something they're barely using. That's the issue, right?
So is this kind of a similar issue to Salesforce now, which is that you're asking me to pay something for something new, and I'm not even getting the value out of the existing suite of tools that I'm paying for? Is that the common thread here?
That is another layer which is really spot on your part. On top of this, so they're looking at Copilot and going, yeah, I'm doing it for note-taking. And again, I think Aaron and I would both agree, like there's probably a little bit more other use cases, but that's one that we hear all the time. What value is there? Then the underlying subscription price for E3, which by the way, after November 1st, they're getting rid of all volume discounting. So that's going to get even more expensive. But what's happening is customers are looking deeper at their E3 or their E5 subscriptions and they're going, wait a minute, I'm using 40% of that. So I'm paying air for something that's very expensive. And then you want me to put something on top of it, which is also expensive, which is probably going to have more air in it. So to understand this, you want me to put my neck on the line to buy a lot of air that might become valuable. It might become valuable. But by the time it comes value, am I up for my next renewal in 3 years? Like, what are we doing?
Right.
And so I'm not willing to put, just like on Salesforce, am I going to be the one who puts my neck on the line for that? I don't know. That's a tough one.
So, Aaron, how is it that Satya Nadella is rearranging the company to address some of those issues? I mean, he's been making some changes.
Yeah, so I mean, we saw a big shakeup in the Office unit earlier this year. Specifically, he brought in two executives who were not working on Office previously. One is Charles Lamanna, who was working on business applications like Dynamics, and then the other is Ryan Roslansky, who is the CEO of LinkedIn. Both of those executives are now overseeing the Office products, but Ryan specifically is still serving as the CEO of LinkedIn while, reporting directly to Satya in that role, which I think kind of underscores the urgency that there was around finding new leaders to lead these products. And, from what I've heard, they've been moving quickly. I heard that Charles Lamanna was, pretty closely involved in this effort to bring in Anthropic models to make some of these products work better. So I think now we're probably going to see some announcements between now and the end of the year in terms of new features or upgrades to the features in Office Copilot that I think the goal there is to move the needle more on actually automating white collar work so that companies can feel like they're getting, cost savings in the form of not having to pay people to do as much human white collar labor.
Right. Adam, last question for you. I mean, you spend every minute of your day talking to customers buying from these big tech companies. You're telling us, hey, they're concerned about the value they're getting from their existing products. They're not convinced on the value of the new products. a lot of questions in the air. How do you think this plays out? I mean, let's go forward 3 years. What's your prediction here on are we going to see some major sort of re-rankings of the big tech companies? Are we going to see startups, these AI startups, become, big public tech companies to compete with them? How do you see this happening?
Yeah, I think it's a good question. What I would tell you is that in this particular space, when we talk about productivity suite, I mean, I know I'm oversimplifying, but like that's what this is attaching to, right? If we're just being candid and honest out there, at least the customers we work with, the only other name is Google, right? Workspace, and I'm not counting them out in this game. I just think that what I predict is going to more happen is that Microsoft is going to continue to find ways to get creative, which are usually not beneficial to the customer. They do it to create leverage, to force the customer's hand into where they want them to go. 2 examples, I mentioned on November 11th, all the volume discounting is going away. They're going to say to the customer, hey, well, what if I can help you on your E3 price if you added Copilot? I have put this out there. Others have as well. I would not be surprised if you started seeing something like, hey, E5 now comes with Copilot, right? They're going to force the movement to E5, right? They're going to remove optionality. So they're going to force customers into a path. In other words, if you want the other things that come with it, because you started using Defender, you started using the security pieces that come in E5. Now, in order to get, you're going to have to keep that. You're going to have to add Copilot, right?
But do you think customers are going to stand for that?
I think they're not. And what I'm already seeing is this. There's 2 things. Customers are spending their time focused very, very, very closely on where can I take my ball and go home. They're really focusing on the pieces where they can. They're being honest with themselves. Could I really rip out Microsoft 365 E3? Could I do that? Could I? I don't know if I can. And the answer, if I don't know, is probably no. But what can I do?
Yeah.
AWS, GCP, want my Azure business. Highly competitive. Maybe I'll go away on that. Let's talk about things like D365. On the last conversation we were having, you asked me about Microsoft potentially coming in and taking Salesforce business. Don't think Salesforce isn't going to come in and try to take D365 business.
Right.
Unified support. This is a really important one, and we haven't talked about it, but I'm going to spend a second on this if I can.
Very
when you
quickly.
talk Copilot pricing, you have to factor in unified support, because if you're a unified support customer, it's a percentage of your net spend. If you add Copilot, your unified support cost goes up as well, astronomically. Customers can move off of unified support as a lever.
And I think what you're getting at, and it's a great graphic in Kevin McLaughlin's story, which is the last story we were talking about, the Salesforce story. He has a great graphic that shows a lot of these big public tech companies and the products that they're all now offering. And there's a lot of overlap in them. And like you said, I think we're going to see a lot more crawling on each other's turf. Adam and Aaron, thank you so much for coming on the show. Adam, thanks for coming on for the doubleheader. Maybe we'll have to have you on again. That is Aaron, who covers Microsoft, for the information, and Adam Mansfield at UpperEdge. Okay. Well, Index Ventures made a big hire this week. The company tapped MongoDB's now former chief product officer to be its newest partner at the firm. Sahir Azam spent more than 9 years at Mongo, but he is now taking his talents to the land of startups. I want to bring him on to talk about some of his reflections and also the current software climate. Sahir, good to see you.
Good to see you, Akash. Thanks for having me on.
Congrats on the new gig. You must be excited.
I am. It's already very busy, and it's been great.
You don't have to worry about quarterly reports and all those headaches.
It's just a different set of things to worry about. So
well, we're thinking long term now. We're all about the long term investing here, right? Right in venture.
Well, as a chief product officer, I was lucky enough to be able to think at Mongo. But yeah, definitely, it's a different environment and a fun new challenge. So thank you.
Great. Well, so. I mean, let's just talk about what I do want to get some of your reflections on sort of how product management has changed in the era of AI, because I think that's something you've been in product for so long now. But very quickly, what will you be focused on at Index investing in?
Yeah, absolutely. So first off, Index as a fund is a very flexible platform, which is really attractive to me, meaning I have the ability to invest everywhere from seed all the way through growth and across geographies. And we don't specialize down to a point where we limit partners to particular domains. Now, that being said, I have a lot of history background domain in AI, data, infrastructure. So those are areas I'll definitely be spending time. They're only getting more strategic,
Right.
and also starting to dip my toe into security as well as a clear adjacency. I think that whole market is going to be very dynamic as people try to build these new style of applications powered by AI. And so those will be kind of my core focus.
Got it. Got it. So let's get into this topic of the role of the PM in the era of AI. Mean, you managed a big team at Mongo, and I presume you're going to be advising a lot of these portfolio companies on how to build their product teams. How have you seen that role change over the last 3 years, and how are you how might you counsel some of these younger startups on building these product teams with AI in mind?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think, you know, there's no shortage of, people out there that have rightfully said that the velocity and pace of execution right now in AI startups is just faster than I think anything we've ever seen. It's highly competitive. You're hearing kind of 996 culture, and
Right.
in many ways, the product evolution is happening so fast that the traditional defensible moat of technical differentiation is really hard to sustain. And so agility of execution is sort of prime for that. As a counterpoint to that, though, it also means distribution and brand really matter. So, as a PM, I think it's critically important to not just be a more classic inbound oriented product manager working only with engineering as kind of your key stakeholder, working on prioritization and shipping, but really thinking holistically about the strategy of distribution in conjunction with, VP sales, CRO, et cetera, and designing the right architecture for the go to market to be able to build that as equal and if not as important as a differentiating factor of the business as the core IP of the technical implementation.
And I want to make sure I'm understanding what you're saying correctly. Are you saying that basically sales and marketing and differentiating that side of it, what we call, go to market, that is now coming into sort of the purview of the product team as well? Is that, am I understanding correctly?
I'm not, I mean, certainly I don't believe those functions of marketing and sales go away as the primary owners of those functions and numbers. But I think the more commercially minded a PM is in terms of understanding the dynamics of the market and helping those teams execute aggressively and capture this market because it's moving so fast, I think that's a critical part of the job. I always viewed that as the case, kind of built through my career coming out of go-to-market roles, the first half of my career before moving into product. Just the pace of everything and how fast everything's moving in AI makes that even more important.
Right.
The other piece of it is, judgment and the qualitative aspects of the job are ever more important. And I think it's interesting to watch how the domains of software engineering, design, and product will become more blurry over time. I don't think those traditional silos are going to exist in the same way if we fast forward in the next few years.
What do you mean by judgment and the qualitative? So what do you mean by that?
Yeah, ultimately, it's going to be the idea of creating software is becoming, more and more easy. So many PMs will start to not just write product requirements and do research, but actually start to prototype the actual ideas that they're working on in an easier way than ever. I think, same thing goes for designers, as they think about their domain. And so I think the whole definition of those three core areas of R&D are going to become very, very intertwined. And therefore, it puts a premium on, understanding markets, understanding customers, having good taste on technology design and implementation.
Right.
And those are hard to, there's a intangible sort of qualitative aspect and, good business judgment that's necessary for those versus just being a much more mechanical or project management oriented aspect of the role, which will become more and more automated over time.
Right. One of the questions I wanted to ask you sort of relates a little bit to the prior two discussions we had about Salesforce's progress and Microsoft's progress selling their AI software. And it basically relates to, the willingness for large companies to try startups' products. And, as someone who worked at a large public company, I mean, you must have been thinking all the time about startups that were coming underneath you with sort of the next big thing. And I wondered, as I'm sure you talked to customers as well in your prior role, has the willingness to try out, startup software, these up and coming tools, has that willingness increased at all with AI? Has it stayed the same? Has it always been the case? We're just trying to sort of assess, again, the velocity with which some of these young hotshot companies could really take over market share for a company like a Salesforce or a Microsoft one day.
Yeah, it's interesting. I think on one hand, incumbents are moving faster than they have historically in other markets, which makes, in one hand, it harder for startups versus it used to be the slow moving old, ISVs would take a long time to react. And so it created more timing, sort of opening for a new player to come in. Right now, I think it's a land grab. And I think the large companies recognize that. And so the competitive landscape from the vendor side is different than I think prior cycles that I've seen, at least in my career. But I think what's very unique about AI is if you think about traditional large enterprise, which is the deepest pockets in some segments of the market that a lot of startups are going after, there's just so much top-down urgency to go after AI and show a win and show
Right.
ROI. So there's a lot of budget to take more risk on AI startups than there was in the early days of SaaS and cloud. I remember that distinctly, where it took quite a bit of time for traditional enterprise to get there. So I think that's different this time around, which is exciting as a startup entrepreneur because now you can go sell to some of the largest, most established brands and get in there earlier than it probably would have been in a prior cycle.
Right.
I think there's a
Right.
danger to that too, though, because there's a lot of budget sloshing around. And so just because you've landed in a particular, customer does not necessarily mean there aren't three of your other competitors in there also getting some piece of that experimental budget and pie of AI. And so I think my advice to founders is to be hyper paranoid on making sure just because you land doesn't mean you're going to retain that customer and that it's high quality revenue, and really making sure you're delivering value and consistently expanding and ultimately winning the account and not just getting a piece of a very frothy pie at the moment.
Right. Right. I think that's a great point. I want to ask you very quickly before I let you go. So the next guest we've got coming on is the CEO of Clay, and they are one of those fast-growing startups. They're in the sales and marketing software space, and so you're a new partner now at Index Ventures. So my question for you is, and I'm going to ask him. The first question is coming from you. What question do you want me to ask the CEO of Clay as it relates to his business in sales and marketing software?
Yeah, I think I'd love to understand sort of how he views the long term of go to market. Like right now, obviously, there's a lot of focus on AI, but I'd love to understand what functions they think are ultimately fully automated away versus
Right.
what functions are really just high leverage. And now you have a smaller team. Now they're using AI to just drive a lot more impact for the organization. That's kind of one. And then I'd love to hear his take on this very trendy forward deployed engineer approach that many of these AI companies are taking.
All right, great. Well, so here you'll have to keep watching the stream to see his answers. So here, thank you so much for coming on the show. I appreciate it. That is Sahir, the new partner at Index Ventures. Okay, well, for our final segment, we have talked about how Salesforce is approaching AI, but many AI startups are going after its turf in sales and marketing software. One of those companies is Clay. The company raised money this summer at a $3.1 billion valuation. It is on track to hit $100 million in revenue this year, according to the New York Times. I want to bring on Kareem Amin, the CEO of the company, to talk about where he is taking his business. Kareem, welcome to the show. It's great to have you.
It's great to be here. Thanks for having me.
So we had Sahir Azam on the show just before you. I think you probably heard part of his conversation there. The question that he had, which I actually, I mean, it's basically what I wanted to talk to you about, was sort of the future of sales teams. We could call it go to market. You can call it what you want. People in the sales function. I want to know what their role looks like 5 years from now, and I think that's what he was getting at. So how do you see these teams evolving in the advent of AI?
For sure. Well, let me kind of talk to you about how we think about it. So the way I think about go to market is that there are three laws that govern that market, right? You want to be different than everybody else so that you
Right.
stand out. And then actually, by definition, if you try to scale that, you will saturate the market. And so you need to constantly be evolving what you're doing. Those are
Okay.
the kind of the three things that define how you win in the market.
Right.
And I think that the way the teams evolve, given those laws, and then AI is accelerating kind of the movement from something unique to something that saturates. you need to have tools that allow you to do that cycle faster than before, which was kind of why we've developed Clay as like an IDE for turning any idea you have to reality.
Right.
And so I think that teams will evolve to have what we call GTM engineers that will be embedded in marketing, sales, and customer success. And they'll allow you to do an extremely kind of like hyper-specific campaign and enable a lot more of the sales and marketing teams without, you're not going to replace kind of their jobs. You're going to actually have GTM engineers that allow you to scale tactics and then enable all of the reps that you have.
So the way that I understand it is basically, I mean, it's sort of like a sales intelligence tool, right? You can sort of learn more about your potential leads, prospective customers that you are trying to sell to. You sort of give them a little bit of information about, hey, here's what I know about this set of customers, and then Clay kind of gives you back a lot more information about them. That's kind of the way
that's a
that
great
I
description.
understand.
Yeah.
So okay, so you're helping sales teams learn about their customers. Maybe for next time, I would love to sort of understand where you get the data from, and where all that comes from. That's kind of a longer discussion. What I do want to know from you then is, so you're giving sales teams more tools. How do you sort of preserve the? When I think of sales, I think of these are relationships, right? I mean, and so
Right.
are you changing the nature of those relationships? Does the human to human interaction component, does that look different? Is it going away? Is it happening less? Like, how do you see the sales process changing with a tool like yours?
I think it should be happening more, right? So what we're doing is giving you third-party data stuff that you can find on the web, right? Like how big the company is, how fast it's growing, and then first-party data, things that you know already about a customer.
Mm-hmm.
And what I think what we were talking about with these forward deployed engineers, or we call them go-to-market engineers, is that they would use a tool like Clay to prep the team so that they have all that information ahead of time. So when you're talking to someone, you've already done all your research about
So
the
they're
person.
smarter, basically. If I'm a salesperson,
Yeah.
I'm smarter about my customer.
Right. And you can even get the information in real time. Like you should be able to ask Clay, hey, have we done a POC with this, with companies like this before? How have we priced it for companies like this before? Right. What is the actual selling point for the particular problem that this customer has that our product will fix? So you should be able to get all of that ahead of time and in real time if you need it. The goal is to facilitate actually better conversations. The way that we think about sales is it's actually someone needs something and you happen to have it and you need to communicate that to them at the right time.
Right.
It's not that you're, finding people that don't care about it and trying to force them to use your product. Yeah.
So, I mean, doesn't it feel, and I'm just looking ahead here, you guys have grown so quickly, you're going to do $100 million in revenue. Doesn't it feel like a company like yours would fit really nicely inside a company like Salesforce?
I think the way to think about it actually is the comparison with Salesforce is interesting because, ostensibly you're a CRM, but actually it's a go-to-market tool stack. And I think what we do at Clay is if you have a CRM, it's not very useful unless it has information in it, right? Like you need to have potential customers in it, and we're actually upstream from Salesforce. So I think over time, the question is, do you store your data inside Salesforce? Do you store it inside a data warehouse like Snowflake? Clay is actually agnostic to where you store the data. The CRMs were made for a time period where sales reps had to enter the data manually.
Yeah.
But now the data is being collected automatically, like in a video call like this, or maybe it's through bugs that got submitted, right? Or product analytics. And Clay ingests all of that unstructured data, makes sense of it, and then takes action on it. So we call ourselves a system of action.
But don't you think you could scale the business a lot quicker if you were inside one of these big publicly traded CRM companies? I mean, you have access to all their customers.
I think the thing with that is that our ambition is bigger than that, right? It's if you have your data in Salesforce or if you have it in HubSpot, we're agnostic to that. It doesn't really make sense. If Clay was in Salesforce, there would be another company that pops up to take the space to work in all the other CRMs or the custom kind of places where you put your data in.
Right. Got it. Well, it's an interesting space, Kareem. Thank you so much for coming on the show and talking about it. Next time you come on, we are going to talk about the data angle to all this because I'm fascinated by just all the different directions that data flows in this new environment. But thank you so much for coming on the show. That is Kareem Amin, the CEO at Clay. Okay, well, that does it for today's show. A reminder, we are live on this stream Monday through Friday at 10 a.m. Pacific, 1 p.m. Eastern. I want to thank Amazon Web Services, who is our presenting sponsor for this production. And I want to thank you for tuning in. We really do appreciate your viewership. I am already excited for our next show tomorrow. And so until then, bye-bye for now.